You're listening to episode 334.
Welcome to Transforming Missions podcast, providing you with insights and resources you need to lead a movement of Jesus followers.
Optimism is often confused with hope.
Well, I agree with that, but I need you to say more because we've said before, the hope we're talking about isn't just wishful thinking.
So here's how I distinguish optimism and hope. Optimistic people think the future will be better than the present. You're hopeful when you think the future will be better than the present, and you have a role in making it so. Do you hear the agency and what it means to be a person with hope?
Sarah, I do. And as I think about Christ-centered leaders, we have a role in facilitating hope. Think for a moment about how leaders facilitate agency, empower people to claim agency or negate their agency altogether. So I think that's part of our conversation today.
Yeah, and just hearing you name those three different approaches, I don't have to think too hard about any of those because I've experienced them and probably done all three, and I've never intentionally negated someone else's agency, but I've certainly experienced it in ministry, and I'm starting with the hard one first because what I'm thinking about is in those times, in a specific context, agency was absent. It doesn't make it right, it doesn't make it okay, and at the very same time, that's where hope comes in. Because there can be other pathways. There are other pathways to live into our mission of making disciples of Jesus Christ, and no one can take our agency away from making disciples of Jesus Christ. God's empowered each one of us to do that in our baptism, and that's hope.
Yes, it is. And also where leaders need to be self-aware enough to know how they impact others. That's another part of this agency.
And the leaders who aren't self-aware don't know that we're talking about them, right?
I won't live that one down, will I?
No, you won't. And that's okay. So let's go back to the agency and hope for a minute. I'll stop poking fun. Let's go back to agency and hope. As leaders, we have an opportunity to facilitate and help people claim their agency.
Yeah, I believe we do. And when we're working with teams of people, part of what we can do is rehearse hope. Now, I know that sounds interesting, rehearsing hope. But given where we are, given our goal, how we reach our goal, as a leader, you don't want to be one of the obstacles that get in the way of the path. It's easily done, but let's think of it this way. It's the leader's role to remove obstacles. Whatever we do, when you know where you're starting, you know where you're going, and you're asking yourself how we're going to get there, and you have the agency to get there, just know that there's going to be somewhere, sometime, there's going to be a barrier, there's going to be an obstacle. Now, what's that going to be? I don't know that you can predict it. It just comes up at certain times. And to be a bit facetious, it may be that somebody had bad sausage the night before. I mean, it can be that bad or that simple. But here's the point. If you're moving towards your goal, there's always going to be, and it doesn't have to be this way, but there's always going to be something you have to navigate to get beyond that. And so in the church, it may be money. It may be that it's an idea that somebody doesn't like. It may be that it's an idea that everybody likes. You just don't know how you're going to get there. But you've got to navigate those obstacles and barriers.
Or here's one that we hear often. It's never been done that way before.
That certainly is an obstacle, and another obstacle is on the other end of that. And as we've tried that before and it didn't work. Those are two very plentiful, maybe is the word. They come up a lot, especially in churches or in groups of people that try to block what we're not trying to do. And that's an obstacle. The people aren't the obstacle. It's the idea or how we're going to get there. Haven't done it that way before, or we tried that once and it didn't work, are both obstacles we have to navigate.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yes, it does. And I'm wondering if I've experienced you, Tim, and I've witnessed you in your role as a leader help others navigate the obstacles around them. It's not that you're doing it for them or taking away their responsibility. I think the word that and phrase that I've heard you offer is, I'm here to be your advocate. And to be that voice, and part of what I hear in the context of this conversation, when you say that, I'm here to be your advocate, is you're helping people find the pathways to claim the agency to work toward the goal that they're trying to achieve.
Right. Now, many times when I say that, Sarah, I've either made an assumption or have experienced with the persons with whom I'm talking that they're giving away their agency. We just can't get this done. And so tell me what you need and let me be your advocate. Tell me what you need and let me walk with you. And instead of you taking the hit, if it has to ask for something or if somebody's standing in the way, let me do that for you so that we can reach the goal we want to reach. And that can happen with anything. I mean, we sometimes think that's just big stuff, but even with a piece of office equipment, if it's not working and you need to have it, tell me what you need and let's see if we can get there.
Yeah, and we've probably brought this up before on the podcast, and this was a big one. At least in my mind at the time, it was a big one. When there was a ministry that I saw an opportunity to start when we were serving in the local church together. And I remember the question that you asked me, and a wet blanket had been put on it for a year up to that point, but God would not leave me. It was one of those things. And when you came and I gave it to you and you said, so what do you need to make this happen? And I said, $25,000, thinking, yeah, there's no way that this is ever going to come into being. And your response was not, well, I can't come up with that much. I mean, I don't even think you had been there 2 months at that point. It might be the same amount of time that you've been in West Virginia as we record this. You didn't say, no, we can't do that. No, I don't know where that money's going to come from. No, it's not going to happen. Or that's a lot of money for one specific new ministry that we've never. You said, let me see what I can do. And together we found different pathways. All of the pathways that I had tried up to that point to get to the goal that I was seeing God inviting us to work towards had been shut down. And suddenly there was another pathway that opened up. And I bring that up to say, as leaders, sometimes there are big things and sometimes there are little things. And what we're talking about is very different than sitting with a team of people and saying, I quote unquote, you can't see my hands right now, making quote signs, I hope we can make this work. I hope we can make this work, is wishful thinking. And optimism is at play then because agency is missing in that. And so hopefully our examples help you to see how agency as a leader can be something that you can help others to claim and not to negate that.
And Sarah, I'm sorry, it's not about food, but that can happen when we're tired. We can get tripped up. We've not eaten well. We can get tripped up if we're not emotionally healthy. We can get tripped up on a lot of different things. And I can give you examples about that. I mean, just when you're tired and you get weary, you'll do just about anything other than what you're doing. So you just kind of give up the agency.
Right.
And if you're not emotionally healthy, that shows up a lot of times in, well, I want everybody to like me. And I want everybody to like me too, but it's not about people liking me. And so I'll give up on something if I'm going to feel like I'm going to challenge somebody that I want their approval.
Yeah.
Those are things where we give up agency and actually become barriers, obstacles.
Yeah. Your example of when we're weary, we will do just about anything other than, what's in front of us. It's a pithy saying, but I've heard people say, then stop and rest. Don't give up.
Right.
And rest is not an obstacle. Rest is something, it goes back to that self-awareness. What do you need to take care of your soul as a leader? And sometimes that's rest. And it's okay.
Well, you've taught me, I think we've talked about it in past episodes, that when you feel like you're stuck, you've gotten to the obstacle, or we didn't say it this way, but this is what I'm thinking now. You get to the obstacle, you get to the barrier, and you're just tired and you don't know what to do. Get up and walk outside. Just get up and get a different view, get some fresh air, and then come back and look at it again.
Yeah.
It may be that simple, but that's a wonderful way to reorient instead of giving up agency and maybe I can put it in a little theological context. You take a deep breath of the Spirit and you come back and look at it again. I think, Sarah, when we talk about hope and where I get stuck, and it's not stuck with hope, that'd be pretty good to be stuck with lots of hope. It comes down to the place where we are just operating with optimism, because optimism isn't hope. In fact, optimism can undermine your ability to navigate the future. You get stuck and you get frustrated, but yet you're a positive person. And so you're just optimistic. When we're talking about hope here, we're talking about it may take a little work to get there.
Yeah. And with hope, you're holding on to that agency, and you believe that's the essence of agency. You believe you have a role in making it happen, and making it happen might require a lot of work. You have a role. That's the point, in creating the future that you want for yourselves and for others. And when you don't feel that, or you're not experiencing that, it's a good place to pause and breathe in the Spirit, as you said, and say, okay, what do I need to do to reclaim that agency so that you can continue moving forward?
Yeah, so you've got me thinking here that maybe as a leader, the question we ask ourselves as leaders, or maybe you need to ask yourself, is, am I facilitating hope? Maybe you don't even ask the alternative, because it's not even helpful to leadership. Just, am I facilitating hope, and what do I need to do here to make that hope happen?
Would playing out a life example be helpful at this point?
Well, it would for me, since I like stories and I like examples. So yes.
Is there a story that you're thinking of?
No, ma'am.
You just ma'amed me. You've been in West Virginia how long?
I think maybe you have an example.
Think for a minute, and we said this a couple of episodes ago as well, and I bring it up again, not to belabor the point, but because it's such a common example in our life and in our world. Think of someone that you know and love who is encountering a health challenge, and someone says to them, stay hopeful. Think for a moment about what they're hearing when that is said. They're probably hearing something like this: I have a disease running through my body, and you want me to wish it away.
That's not helpful.
No, it's not helpful at all. The example that we just gave is optimism. What's helpful is compassion. What's helpful is not shying away from the reality. What's helpful is saying to someone, ugh, that's tough. And I see how you're persevering. I see you navigating how hard this is. And how can I be helpful to you? Or maybe it's something like, I see you doing everything you can to fight this disease. I'm standing with you. We're standing with you. What do you need to keep focused on all that you have to live for and to fight for?
And to shift that just a little bit, let me be your advocate. That really feels different, even hearing it and not living it. Just hearing you say it, it feels different than keep your chin up. It's going to be, smile. It could get worse.
Right. Those are examples of optimism.
Right.
But hope energizes us to act. Hope fills us with dignity. Hope gives us meaning to move ahead. Hope helps us navigate the challenge, whatever the challenge is.
Those are all good reasons to claim agency and to live with hope.
I think so.
What I'm thinking of is what's called the Stockdale Paradox. And I first read it and then been reminded of it, partly by you and our conversations, and then other times when Jim Collins wrote about it in his book, Good to Great. Very quickly, Admiral Stockdale was a POW in the Vietnam War, and he was in a place where other soldiers were held as prisoners of war. And there were two strains of thought going on in the camp at the time. And one is there were a group of soldiers or a group of prisoners that were very optimistic. They would say, well, we'll be out by Christmas. And Christmas would come and they weren't out. And well, we'll be out by Easter. And Easter would come and they weren't out. The other thought was where Stockdale was. And Stockdale, it was kind of like he's saying, what do we need to do today to get to the next place? What do we need to do today to know that one day we'll be out of here? Now, you may not see the difference. It is kind of subtle. But one of them, the optimistic people, will be out by Christmas, actually are doing something that we think is good, but they were giving up their agency. Because as Stockdale told this story and Jim Collins was interviewing him, Stockdale said, I never lost faith. I knew that one day we'd be out. But was it going to be by Christmas? No. Was it going to be by Easter? No. He doesn't say it this way. He just never gave up the way we're talking about it. He never gave up his agency.
Right.
He never gave up the idea that he could still get to the place of leaving. So I think if I remember the story correctly, Collins asked Stockdale, who didn't make it out? And Stockdale said, that's easy. It was the optimist. And Collins asked him, the optimist, he said, I don't understand. He was confused. And Stockdale said it was the optimist because those were the ones who said we'll be out by Christmas. Christmas would come, it would go, and then they'd say we'll be out by Easter, and Easter would come, and Easter would go. We'll be out by Thanksgiving, and Easter would come, and it'd be Thanksgiving, then Christmas would come. And he said they really died of a broken heart because what they had done is to give up their hope and put it in the hands of somebody else, which they no longer had agency to make it happen. So as Collins tells the story, Stockdale turned to him and said, this is a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. starting with reality, the true reality, and knowing where you're going, and then having the agency to navigate the barriers. This isn't what Stockdale said, but this is what Stockdale said. That's how he got through the prison, his time of being a prisoner of war. Because he never gave up. He never gave up the hope that he would get out, but he never gave up his agency to navigate each day to get to that end. So that's an illustration of what we've been talking about.
Yeah, and the distinction between the optimists who Stockdale said they were the ones who ended up dying of a broken heart, and Stockdale is an example or an embodiment of hope. The research around hope points to why that happened. For the optimists, when they were saying, we're going to get out by Christmas, they were really tricking their brains into thinking the plans were already made. And so that was negating any agency to find another pathway of how to make it through the horrific, in my mind, horrific, because I can't even imagine it, experience that they were undergoing day in and day out. And Stockdale instead kept finding ways to live each day, one day at a time, keeping that goal of, we're getting out of here. I don't know how we're getting out of here. I don't know when we're getting out of here. But he kept hold of his agency to find different pathways, knowing the end goal was being free. That's hope.
Sarah, as we come to the close of this episode, there are two characteristics of people with hope they exhibit when they're under pressure. And we've made it sound like that hope is just a real positive thing, even though you have to navigate the barriers. But, you can get agitated and you can be proactive. And what becomes possible when these two characteristics of people with hope find themselves under pressure? You can get agitated, you can get proactive.
Well, I think of those people as causing good trouble.
I like that.
That's
good trouble.
Good trouble. Because when you're agitated and proactive, you might stir up some stuff, but for a good reason. There's goodness there. And I might even go as far as to say the goodness of God in the context that we're talking about it. What I'm thinking about is if you've been annoyed by positive thinking, it could be because it usually brings out negative thoughts. What happens when somebody says, think positive? You think of all of the reasons why you can't be positive. And if you think platitudes can stay on the Hallmark cards and self-improvement isn't all it's cracked up to be, you're not alone. And here's why. Wishful thinking, the optimism that we've been talking about, the positive thinking schemes, it's all fast food. It's mental fast food. There's no depth to it. And it certainly doesn't go to the depth of our soul in terms of forming us and helping us to live as people, the people that God created us to be. They don't help us navigate life and leadership. They might give us a quick dose of positive energy, but it's going to stop there. They don't move you to action, but hope can do that. Hope sparks action, an action that moves us to a future, and it's a future of hope.
So, Sarah, as we bring this to a close, what I'm thinking is, and I want to say this the right way because it's going to be offensive to some, so I can only say it in the least offensive way, and that is Jesus was not an optimist.
Right.
Jesus, if I may do it this way, was God's hope offered to the world. That in Jesus, we see how we live with the obstacles of life and still get to where God wants us to be. I'm thinking that optimists sometimes, and we've had this conversation, that too often we in the church are just nice to each other. That is that junk food nicety. That's the that doesn't get us anywhere. But the part of hope that I'm thinking about that gets us somewhere is that kindness, compassion, that generosity that we talk about. And it's not trying to fit in what we talk about into hope, but that's how you navigate the barriers. When there are, like in the world in which we live, when there's hatred, how do you navigate hatred to get to the place? Well, the only way you can deal with hatred is with love. And when people are in dark places where there's no light, how do you navigate that? Well, you bring some light.
Right.
And all of that's who Jesus is. Sometimes when we say Jesus is our hope, it's not about, well, I'll just turn everything over to him. Most of the time when Jesus is our hope, it's that this is who you are as a follower of Jesus, and this is the agency you have now to love as you've been loved.
Right.
Didn't mean to take us down a path we weren't talking about, but that's what I was thinking about as we come to the end of this episode.
No, it's exactly what we were talking about. Thank you for that. As we continue this journey of hope together through this podcast, perhaps we've illustrated for you the difference between optimism and hope, so that you can continue to claim your agency and help lead others towards the goals that you're trying to achieve in whatever context you are serving and however God is inviting you into God's story in this time and place. As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/334. And remember, who you are is how you lead. Bye for now.